going to try to do two parts today. One about listening to youth. We did a survey in the General Counsel Office of Young People this year, and so I'm going to share a little bit about that. And then I want to talk, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a youth climate program that we had over the summer, and share some research that I did related to young people and climate change that I had an extended study leave. So just finished that. And was back to work this week. So here we go. So we did have what we called the Religious Participation in Canada survey over the summer, and it was mostly United Church youth and young adults, and if not associated with the United Church, they had some connection. We did have it wasn't 100% United Church or even 100% Christian. So we had 271 young people who responded, and you can see the breakdown of age, mostly in that older teen to young adult age. And I think that's probably based on a couple of factors. The big one being because of the pandemic, we lost touch with a lot of younger youth that we may have had in previous years. And I think many churches are still experiencing that struggle of getting young people re-engaged. Mostly, European origin, mostly female, mostly Christian, mostly straight, but fairly good breakdown of folks participating. So we learned from them that when they are selecting a community of faith or another type of religious organization to associate with, theological stance and stance on social political issues is the priority for them. That's what they're looking at first, and that the theological stance and the social political stance needs to be progressive. They're much more likely to participate in a church that explicitly identifies as 2S LGBTQIA+ affirming. They're pretty, 32% were neutral on their perceptions of the church, being, positive. But 11% have very positive perspective of the church, view of the church, and 34% have a positive view of the church and its impact in the community. Activities that they're interested in, the number one activity that young people said they would be interested in participating in is a community meal. And when I saw that, I thought, that's something we can do. We can do community meals, and we can offer meals for young people. I know our campus ministers have been telling us that food security is a big issue for students on campus, particularly international students right now. So I think if communities of faith want to partner with a campus ministry to offer a meal to young people, that is a wonderful ministry to think about. Also, community outreach and community nature events. Young people are interested in being out in nature more. And so if communities of faith offer events within the natural environment, then that's going to be attractive. They're also attracted to any type of social justice initiative and mental health support groups. And They also named worship as a pretty high on their list of what attracts them. So sometimes I know we think, oh, young people don't want to participate in worship, but they do. Um, they are also the number one thing that, oh, well, here I can do this. Convenience is something that they look for. Um, and evening events over the weekend um, is much more convenient for them. And evening worship is something that they look for. As I said, they're attracted to outdoor events. They also said that in a cafe or pub is a location that would be of interest to them. So to have conversations about faith in cafes or pubs is something they'll look for. And they long for communities of faith where they can have conversations about their faith with people their own age and in a setting where they feel like they're on equal footing with the other participants. Um, the number one topic that young people wish churches would talk about more is mental health. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but that is certainly something that I think we need to pay attention to. Um, Other things that they told us was that they often feel that their voices aren't heard, and that the church gives priority to older members or long-term members, and to members with money. So whether that is true or not, that is their perception. They did indicate that they feel a loss of a spiritual or faith community, and they long for a community, but it's often hard for them to find one in which they feel welcomed, and which they feel like their voice is important. We asked them to rank what they thought, the reasons they thought churches wanted them to participate. And the number one reason they feel churches want them participating is to expand the church community, for churches to appear more welcoming and diverse was second. And right in the middle was to provide them as young people with the support and care they need. And fourth, increase attendance and donations. And then last on the list was that a community of faith wants young people to fulfill an important role. This next part will um, be more closely related to climate and to young people and their needs around climate. So the United Church of Canada has a new strategic plan, and climate is actually one of the key objectives in our new plan. And there's four areas of four climate pillars that are part of the strategic plan. So putting our own house in order, and that is helping both general council, regional councils, local churches to think about their carbon footprint and how we can reduce our carbon footprint as an organization. Raising our spirited voices, how can we be better prepared to advocate on behalf of the climate, connecting to the earth, and responding to climate disasters are the four areas. So within the area of raising our spirited voices, this past summer, we had what we called the Climate Motivators program. And we had 15 youth from across the church, ages 15 to 19. And then we had 3 young adult coordinators. Um, and we got Canada Summer Job Funding so that they were employed full-time throughout the summer. We met online for most of the summer, but they also had, and when we were online, we were doing orientation and learning and hearing various speakers on climate change and climate justice. But they were also each working on their own local projects. So they had to have a local community. One person had a camp. Most of the others were working with churches, but they did have a local project that they also did, which again could fall into one of those 4 pillars of raising our spirited voices, reducing our carbon footprint, connecting with the earth, or responding to the climate crisis. So they met for 8 weeks, had their own projects, and then we did have 2 weeks together at a camp in British Columbia, and the moderator came and spent 5 days with us at the camp. So that was really, it was a very good program and well received both by the young people and by the local communities that they worked on their projects with. And it was really meaningful for the moderator to devote that much time to meeting with and working with the young people. So I want you to kind of hold that program in mind and hold in mind that young people, the number one thing they wanted to talk about in church was mental health. And then I'm going to focus a little bit on my study leave that I just came back from and some of my learnings from there. These are pictures from Yellowknife. We have a son, a daughter-in-law, and 2 grandsons who live there. And we were in Yellowknife the week before they had to evacuate. And we saw the smoke, we saw the fires, and we felt the anxiety. And it was really heartbreaking when our son called us once they had reached safety in Alberta, and just to hear the anguish in his voice about what it was like to be driving his family through that to safety. So we've all experienced it in different ways over the summer. Even in Toronto, we experienced smoke this summer from fires up in northern Ontario and Quebec. So these events are coming more often, and they're characteristic of the fact that our human activity is destroying the climate and ecological, the conditions that have allowed civilization to grow and to flourish over millennia. And of course, this is very distressing, and it's having a profound impact on mental health and well-being, and particularly amongst younger people. So one of the books that I studied and the people that I listened to and learned from over my study leave was Dr. Britt Ray, and she wrote the book Generation Dread. She also does a newsletter, podcasts, TED Talks on the impacts of the climate crisis on younger people. And she talks about the often ignored mental health emergency that is within the climate emergency. She believes that leaders in healthcare and leaders in community and leaders, governing leaders, need to make really big, deep changes into how mental health is safeguarded during this time of climate crisis. Um, Going back to the Climate Motivators, while we were at camp together, we had what we called a grief circle, and we let each person talk about their own feelings about, the climate change, climate emergency, and we heard from them that they're losing sleep. They're losing focus. They worry about the climate crisis and what it means for their own lives and for their lives into the future and even for the next generation. And there's a great deal of wondering amongst young people about whether they should even have children during this time of climate crisis. It was really powerful to hear their concerns. And listening, I felt, such a sense not only of grief, but also of guilt. And I knew that when I was their age, I didn't have to worry about that. I mean, we recycled newspapers and we heard that there was a hole in the ozone layer, but we could fix it by not using aerosols. But we just didn't have that depth of worry and fear for the future that young people are feeling today. And Dr. Ray says that the distress, grief, and worry are normal emotional responses to the troubled state of the world. And while that distress and anxiety can threaten mental health, we can also leverage it for courageous climate action and stronger community ties that can help to improve well-being if we're mindful about how to harness our emotions in effective ways. So she talks about climate anxiety linked repeatedly with pro-environmental behavior and with climate activism, and that the distress that we feel can make us pay attention and reassess how we're showing up in the world and how we're working to align our actions with what is needed by the earth and our own values. And, of course, many of us have heard of Greta Thunberg, and it was through her intense climate anxiety and depression that catalyzed the global movement of students striking for the climate. So she's one example of how the anxiety that she felt was harnessed in a good way. Other research and Britt Ray's research as well shows that if a person is supported by a strong community, anxiety and climate anxiety in particular, if they're not supported by a strong community, it can be severely damaging to their mental health, and it can impair functioning and of course result in all sorts of unhealthy behaviors. So what she advocates for, Dr. Ray advocates for a preventive approach that focuses on strengthening resilience and mental well-being of whole communities. She really feels like that whole community approach is what's needed. We need to develop social trust and social ties rather than thinking about supporting mental health through individual therapy or medical approaches. Community and cohesion are what she feels are needed. And the thing that I think about is that the church does know how to create a sense of community. We know how to focus on mindfulness, spiritual practices, meditation. We know how to do those things, and those are emotion regulating skills that can help to help people make their way through climate anxiety. Um, we know how to focus on the good of the community while still trying to support individuals. Um, as a church, we are practiced in helping people feel less alone in their fears, and we can help focus efforts on dealing with uh, fears about climate breakdown. One of the things that she talks about is climate cafes, and I think maybe some of you have heard of grief cafe or death cafe. Maybe some of you have participated in them, but she really thinks those are helpful um, processes to engage in. The other thing that Dr. Ray talks a lot about is that we need opportunities to mourn, that our grief can be individualized, but we need public rituals and opportunities to mourn the grief that we're feeling. And again, churches know how to lead people through a mourning process that can help them work their way through a sense of grief. And finally, of course, she wants communities to keep advocating on behalf of the climate and on behalf of mental health and well-being. She writes a lot about how often right after some sort of emergency, a community will come together. But then it starts to break down, and the people who lack the best, a good community are the ones who get left behind. And she talks a lot about different, different climate disasters that came, and who were the people that got impacted the most and who were the ones that were left behind. Um, so I thought we could maybe first see if there's any questions. I know I kind of went quickly through a lot, but let's see if there are any questions. And then if we have, again, time to talk about, maybe you did this in the beginning, but maybe in small groups, we could talk about our own feelings briefly of the grief, the anxiety, or maybe you have a sense of hopefulness. What are the possibilities that you might see for the church to be part of the solution for the mental health emergency within the climate emergency?